Hello and welcome back to Coast FC, the Canadian soccer podcast focused on all things CPL, Canadian Championship, and more. My name is Felipe Vallejo.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And today's a very special episode, as it is our 50th episode. It's our first episode of 2024. And as you can see, if you are seeing on YouTube or on the visual side of Spotify and the other podcast apps, we are a video cast now as well as a podcast. And we have some friends here to talk to us about some very exciting things that are going on. Before I dive too much into it and before we introduce our lovely friends here, remember to follow us on all of our socials, including Instagram, Threads, Facebook, and Twitter at Coast to Coast FC, as well as on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, and now YouTube and TikTok. So you can see when we upload next and all of the little clips that we have that we're going to be able to give to you now that we're in a visual medium. But as you see, we have a lot of friends here. So we're going to go in alphabetical order by surname. This is like the classroom all over again, starting with Kevin. Kevin, go ahead, introduce yourself to all of the listeners.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin Anderson, a.k.a. the Hammer of Sparks, a big fan out of Hamilton. Nice to see you guys.
Nice to see you. Happy for you to be here. We'll move on now to Josh, who unfortunately can't get his camera to work, but we'll still imagine him as his logo that he has on Twitter. Joshua Healey, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. As they say, I have a face made for radio, so it is probably best to keep me behind the screen here.
I'm sure you look a lot better than that. But we'll move on now to the Wonder Kid himself, Thomas Hewitt. Thomas, how you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks, guys. It's a pleasure to be on.
Happy to have you here, especially after everything you've done in the last little while on the Canadian soccer scene. And last but not least, Zach. For those AFTN listeners, you already know the voice of Zach, but go ahead, Zach.
Hey, Felipe. Hey, Mike. Hey, everyone else. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you here as well. So we have 4 friends. We have 4 guests here for our very first video podcast. And why are we here? That's a great question. It's not just because the CPL has been in overdrive this offseason, but also because we're here to announce the release of our very first Coast to Coast FC Zine.
Yeah, that's right. We've been working with everyone here and a few other people all across Canada, trying to keep up with all of Valour's roster movements while looking back at 2023 ahead to 2024. And Felipe's done an incredible job in putting all this together. We've sent him loads of written work. We sent him loads of questions, and he's brought it all to life. It's been amazing. Yeah, incredible job, buddy.
Yeah, no, I mean, the idea for the Zine was born out of your idea that you had to be able to put in both visual and written form a sort of ode to the exciting 2023 Canadian Premier League season that we had, arguably the most exciting and competitive season that we've had up to date. And so we thought it would be fitting to dedicate some of our time to celebrating that year in CPL, which was also our first season as Coast to Coast FC. And I want to thank not only the contributors that you see before you here, but all of the ones that couldn't make it out for their work and dedication to helping us be able to bring this zine to life. Community was something that was a huge principle in creating the Zine for us. And we wanted to unite some of the people who have been helping grow this league all across the country into one project. And we're very happy to be able to announce that here today. And actually, I'm gonna be able to show you guys now a little bit of the changes that were going on. So we have a new logo here. We have a bit of a rebrand going on. Gone is the cute little the mountains and trees. Now we have I personally think a much slicker logo. And with that new rebrand, also we have the new zine. So this is a little bit of a sneak peek for you guys. This is what the cover looks like, and also what the back cover page looks like. you will, if you want to see more, you're gonna have to go and hit the link on our bio, and whenever we advertise the actual zine for you to be able to see the whole, I think it's like 34 pages that we have now, just chock full of content, including writing from myself and Mike and all of the contributors you see here, and a couple of others as well. A whole dedication to the 2023 season of the Canadian Premier League. It was a labor of love for all of us, and we're so excited to make it public and have it go live so all of you can read it and enjoy it, and hopefully have as much fun as we had making it, probably in a lot less time though. But now that we have that all out of the way, and hopefully you guys are pumped for the episode and for the zine and everything, we're going to go straight into talking a little bit about what has been happening since we had our little Christmas break. So a lot of stuff has happened in the CPL season. And Mike, how about you take it away with our first team?
Yeah, I mean, where else can we start but York United? Thomas, like, new owners in. I made a bit of a fool of myself on the last podcast saying, yeah, with all these new signings from abroad, they'll probably just take a little time, but no, straight in. New big signings coming across. I mean, what are you making of all the moves straight off the bat?
Well, I think the offseason has it's felt overwhelmingly positive since the owners were announced, because there really was so much kind of doubt and fear like hanging over the fans and people involved, with the club, just how this offseason would go, because no one really knew what it would be like. And you make a good point. Right in the same month as the owners were announced, they made their roster changes a couple of weeks after. Now we see Denis Alanovic and Juan Cordova come in as two, in my opinion, pretty exciting signings for the club. Cordova, especially, as someone who has big experience playing in some of the biggest competitions in South America. And I think the owners just do bring that positivity, and also that international appeal, which I feel like is big for York. They mentioned how, if the club does want to maybe go to Mexico for preseason, like that would be an option. And it's definitely very exciting, and there's some really good things coming, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, everything that we've seen so far coming out of York points to a step in the right direction. Seeing the conference of the new owners, obviously you were there, Thomas, but from what they were sort of presenting as, this is not going to be a huge overhaul, but this is going to be just a new sort of philosophy. We're going to keep it local, but also we're going to look towards some international signings, kind of find that balance. And so far, the two signings that you've brought in, one being obviously the Canadian player, Juan Cordova, and the other one being Denis Salanovic, kind of points to that way that York want to sort of build on. And it seems like it's an exciting time to be a York fan right now. Thomas, for you, what are you most excited about in the coming season, knowing that you have this, new owners, you already have a couple of signings under the team's belt. What are you looking forward to most as the season starts to sort of come around?
Well, I'm looking forward to, I guess, just having the good energy back a bit. And York kind of defied a lot of odds and made the playoffs last year. They were in that fifth seed, the final spot, but that was still a huge achievement just based on how they started the season. There were some other low points during the year, like getting beaten 4-0 by Forge at home. That was not great. And then toward the end of the season, they had 3 losses in a row at home, and then kind of, pulled one out of their sleeve to beat Ottawa. And I think having Martin Nash and his entire coaching staff back, alongside with some key players like an Austin Ricci or like an Osazi Di Rosario, those guys coming back for more and is big. And I think it's going to be a great year to kind of see how far they are along. And I think giving Nash and his coaching staff another go to use their system, which has really started working, I think, for them is big, and I think everyone should be looking forward to it.
Kevin, I saw you Kind of laughing there. What have you made of York's changes as a rival there from Hamilton? Do you think there's any cause for concern on your end? Do you think there's some prospects there, or are you not really all that troubled that much by what's happened over at York?
You know what? York, we always want that to be a great rivalry, okay? Because it's so local. The fans come both ways to see the games and everything like that. So it's always good news when something goes well for York. And like Thomas was saying, like watching them fade, beating them 4-0 at their home ground, stuff like that, it looked like it was going to be more of the same old York. So to see them kind of pick it up and start this season off really positively, I think that's a good sign. Sometimes like the rivalry kind of fades a little bit because Calgary, we meet in the finals all the time, right? That's the big, as everyone says, organic rivalry for Forge, right? But having a local derby, there's something that's just really special about that, right? And being able to travel back and forth. So it's exciting to see these moves. And a little bit worrisome because, in Forge World, everything happens at a trickle in the off season. So you get to see all these teams like loading up on players, and we get an announcement that one guy left. And that's basically, so it's exciting to see what's going on. I wouldn't say that we're necessarily worried as Forge fans, but maybe excited for the rivalry to spark up a little bit.
Fair enough. Well, I think we're going to move on now from York over to all the way to the Maritimes here with Josh, Halifax. Biggest news coming out of there, I think, honestly, there's a lot of departures going on, Josh, but biggest one obviously was Daniil Henry not returning. Is this something that you were sort of expecting? Is this the movement that you've seen in general? Is that what you were expecting after Patrice Guys' first season, or did this take you a little bit by surprise?
I don't think I was surprised, and there are a couple of reasons for that. I was actually at the end of year locker room clean out and had a chance to interview Daniil, and at that time he spoke a lot about focusing on himself as a player and becoming the best version of footballer that he could possibly be. And there wasn't too much talk about whether he'd be there next year or not. Obviously, he had an option, but the Wanderers declined to exercise it. So I don't think any of the moves really caught anyone by surprise. But what I will say is that overall, Patrice Geyser and his coaching staff was able to retain the core, the real backbone of the squad, which tied Forge for second last year. So, yeah, it's strange, when you have a former Canadian men's national team player not getting their option exercise. But at the same token, it really speaks to the quality on the pitch and sort of where this squad is going into 2024.
Josh, I was just wondering, on that, you said a lot of these players at the end of the season, you're expecting a lot to go of the sort of fringe players. For me, I just thought maybe Patrice Geyser would have liked to know, okay, well, I've got these backups. I don't need to find a whole lot more and see how that goes. Were you surprised there was that many?
I not surprised. Obviously, I was covering the club all season long, and you kind of get a feeling for the coaching staff's favorites. Last year was a big year in so much that 17, 18 new players were brought in. The vast majority recruited by Patrice and his staff, and then this was an opportunity, I guess, for him to reset the table for the remaining players. So I think we're going to see a lot of NCAA players come in that either he or his staff have connections with. So I don't want to say it was a cleaning of the house, but definitely an opportunity for him to get people and get players who really fit his system. Some of the players, I reported well ahead of time, for example, Theo Colom, supporters and the journalists kind of knew well ahead of time that his option was not going to be renewed by the club. But he wasn't getting a lot of time, and the same can be said for other players who maybe did well under the previous regime. Christian Campagna jumps out as one. He was kind of slated to be a starter at the beginning of the year, and he very quickly is usurped by Dan Nimick and doesn't really get into too many matches. So overall, not too many surprises, and I think it left the fan base kind of nodding their head in agreement. So yeah, very interesting times though.
With Daniel, I got to speak to Daniel when he was out here for the last Halifax game in Vancouver, and yeah, it's interesting. He's in an interesting stage of life where I think he's growing as a person. Like he's a newer dad, and as I was talking to him about that, you could just you could just see he's in this stage of life where he's like, yeah, growing as a person. And so, yeah, I think that impacts you as a footballer and kind of what your priorities are and all that. So, yeah, I also wasn't surprised that he didn't stick around in Halifax, but I do hope we see him back, whether it's in the CPL or we do see him pressing on somewhere else to see, what this next chapter of his career looks like.
I couldn't agree more, Zach. Like, it's one of those things. I interviewed Jordan Wilson the other day, and he talked about, he knew it was the time to transition from football to something else. He felt there was a good moment. I'm not sure if that's the case with Daniil. I think from the way he spoke at his end of season press conference, he still has the fire and the passion to be out on the pitch. It's just, where will that be, and how will that align, as you mentioned, with him being a new dad and his family. And it can be really hard to be out on the East Coast, which is quite a bit further away than the rest of the CPL clubs. So
yeah, family situation wise, for him, it would probably be ideal to be at a place like York or Forge. But yeah, we'll see how things progress.
Zach, I was actually curious with you about some of the outgoings from Halifax specifically. A lot of BC natives that were released, like Christian Campagna, Teo Colom, Jake Ruby. Are those any players that you would see for Vancouver FC as some nifty pickups for in the off season?
Yeah, like as some kids who've gone through the Whitecaps residency academy program at different times or whatever, there are always going to be some kind of links between them and Vancouver FC or maybe Pacific. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe one of those players, or maybe even two, but probably only one. I obviously, it was huge, I think, for this week's signing of Ben Fisk for us as a kind of a returning player coming home. Today, Raynan and Vasco and Mickey were all announced, and they're all coming back on what seems like good deals. So that's exciting. But my understanding is, there are going to be at least two more signings that have local connections to the community here, and so one of those guys probably could fit that bill. The other one, I think, is probably coming from somewhere else, but it would be interesting. I think of those guys, I think I probably saw Ruby play the most, but I think they've all progressed in CPL, and I hope to see them either continue in the league or continue to grow somewhere at a level that's suitable for them.
Yeah, it's going to be and interesting to see how they form. There's move crossover. Kevin, let's go over the Forge. They themselves have lost a couple of players, big names. Magicar James off to Costa Rica. Plenty of returners were announced before that, and it was really exciting about the fact that this club just can continue with the core of their squad. But I mean, there's big names, Pacius as well. Is there any concerns about some of the big names going, and how, what's next this season for you guys?
In my soul, I want to say same old. We lose a couple of big players, whether it was Daniel Crutzen last year, or there's always some big names. Kwame Awuwa left us. We lost Moba Booley, and yet we still keep coming back. We fill those voids, right? But that being said, Magicar James was a force for us in the back line, and he was a force with us paired with Alex Achinati-Janssen. So to have Alex not confirmed yet, a conversation still ongoing, as I understand, and Mandrakar already gone, that's a big hole in the defense. And while we do have defenders who can step in, like Dom Samuels is one of those guys you can plug in all the time to fill holes, you want that starting core to be the same level, right? So it'll be exciting to see. Usually Bobby comes up with a trick up his sleeve to pull up a big name. But as we know in Forge Land, everything is quiet to start the season. So we never find out stuff until last year when we were playing Cruz Azul is when I found out that we had two new players, Poku and Sissoko. They debuted again in those games, right? So it's kind of like you hear nothing, and then you're like, oh, wow, we got a good player once the game starts. So it'll be exciting to see what happens this year. But those are some big losses. And of course, Wubens, I don't think there's a Forge fan who doesn't wish him the best. And we all saw this coming. We knew he was ready to go on to another level. But still, when the time comes, it's a big void, right? So I'm excited to see, and it's still rumors about where he's going to in MLS. It's not confirmed yet, but I would love to see him up at the next level, getting his shot, because I really think he has the talents to play. And it's interesting too, from my perspective, looking at Forge, we see teams like we always take a bit of some banter from the Cavalry fans about all their players that go on to other leagues and other success. And, Forge really doesn't send players to as high levels as you expect for a team that's been so successful. But one of the things that's interesting about that is looking at these guys who want to stick and remain part of the core. That's one of the things you guys were mentioning. Like 15 players signed back from that team after winning yet another championship, 4 and 5 years. A lot of players want to stick around and see this through, right? So I'm excited to see, and there's a lot of guys coming off of some down seasons. So I'm really excited to see what they're going to add to the table coming back this year. Because I know guys like David Choinière has played almost no minutes with injuries and stuff, and he's a big game guy. So to have him healthy for the matches against the Mexican team in Champions League, that's Champions Cup, is going to be fantastic. I'm excited to see this, but there's still some names out there too, like Rama. We don't know what's going on with Rama either. Another solid defender for us, right? So again, not panic time, but definitely some curiosity going on in the Forge behind the scenes for sure.
I guess you've got the bonus of being a little bit later than Cavalry for your first game, so there's still a little bit more time.
Yeah, that's basically it, right? And one of the things that's interesting, I guess you guys will know, like when Forge went down and practice last season, and when they were getting ready for training, they went down to Mexico and they went down to Central America, and Alahens was actually one of the teams that we played down there, and that's where they scouted Manchukar James, actually. So they'd actually been following him all season, having watched him in our preseason. So I think one of the things that we've been very lucky with at Forge is because we've had so much CONCACAF experience, we've got to go down and see players on those teams, whether it was Josh Navarro or Omar Brownie, guys like that. And now teams are seeing our guys as well. So it's exciting for Forge. We don't know exactly what the transfer fee will be and stuff like that, but there's a transfer fee involved because he was signed to come back. So having guys going down that way, and probably looking at guys that we were down there eyeballing earlier for these kind of Champions Cup games, it's going to be exciting to see who we pick up when we finally find out.
Kevin and Felipe, you both know this well, right? It's everyone in this league either loves or hates Forge, right? And if you're not a Forge fan, you probably hate them. But I think it's really, really noteworthy here I think we need to highlight the fact that you brought in James on a free and you're selling him and you're making money. So as disappointing as it is for you, Kevin, to have this hole in your back line that your club, let's face it, are very competent at the possibility of filling that, right? But you have this new hole in your team. Sure, that's disappointing or whatever. But you've also sold a 30-year-old player and made money off of him. So not only you only sold young people in the past, now you've sold old people or older players, and I think that needs to be applauded because I think that's a good step for the league. It's another sign of progress, right? Obviously, you guys have accomplished a lot of firsts for the league, whatever. But I think this is a really important thing, that it shows that players can come in and out of this league, and it doesn't matter. You don't have to be under 20 to make a club money or to help a club progress in that way. And so I think it's a really good thing that this is happening.
Yeah, you know what? That's a really good point you make. You know what? This is, and it's not just for Forge now. Having guys like that come in, be successful, and be able to move on immediately, it's good for the league, right? Because these teams in Central America and abroad, MLS teams, of course, as well, seeing the success and realizing players who've had an off year, maybe they take a shot at the CPL, get their game back in tune, and then look for greener pastures, right? And that's only going to benefit the CPL teams and the quality that they'll have, and in the ability to move players on for a profit, right? No, really good point.
I was actually curious as well, Kevin, on your opinion of the rumors going around with Bobby right now. With Canadian men's national team, because like you mentioned, it's one thing, with Forge as somebody who's followed them as well, to have to lose a couple of players. Okay, you can always make that back up, but it's different when you lose, basically the foundation of the dynasty, the one that started it all in Bobby. You kind of can't take you kind of can't think of Forge without thinking of Bobby, and vice versa. They're kind of just two sides of the same coin. So to potentially lose Bobby to the national team job, does that strike fear a bit, or do you think that's a good chance for a fresh slate, maybe for a new player, a new coach, like maybe like David Edgar, to step in and kind of take that mantle on? What are your feelings around that?
I live in a constant state of panic when it comes to Bobby. No, again, the same with everything. I remember one time getting at one of the press conferences post game. Forge was in a bit of a slump, and I remember saying to Bobby at that time, it was the rumors about going to TFC, that he had done the interview, that he'd interviewed with them, and then later it was the Canadian job, right? And I remember saying to him, do you think this is a distraction for the team? Like, maybe that's why we're slumping a little bit with all the thinking about your next step and stuff. And he was so adamant. He's like, that's what we want here is distraction. We want other teams talking about our players, about our coaches. We want people moving up and moving on, right? So that's the whole goal of this. So from our point of view, like, we've kind of been conditioned for, like, this is going to happen eventually. And we're always talking about, like, I mean, Forge fans, there's a reason why people hate Forge. Well, there's a lot of reasons to hate Forge. I know that. I'm aware. But one of the things is, like, to have this kind of success, to, like, have 4 titles in 5 years, or to be even runners up in the years that you're not winning, you're always in that mix. And with that being the case, it can't last forever, right? So eventually, you know, Bobby's going to move on with all his success. He's going to move on to another job. You just hope it's something big, and you hope that the succession planning has been made. And I think with David Edgar on the bench and some quality guys around, and Kyle Becker is definitely a senior player in the league too, I would imagine he'd have a shot if he wanted something on the bench as well when his career is done. But he's still got some years in him. He's almost an MVP, so I'm not going to make that too early. The captain will throw an elbow at me. But yeah, I think that definitely it's nerve-wracking to think of what the team would look like without Bobby. But at the same time, the way that the team's being built, we knew this was coming. So hopefully we get at least another good run out of him. I'm really looking forward to the season with Champions Cup. But I'm always feeling in the back of my mind that Bobby's got a bigger step to make.
I was going to say, all great points, Kevin, and enjoy it while you can, man, because the rest of the league's coming for you guys. So
I totally can feel that. I mean, to have won second place last year on away goals, which was like the weirdest way to win second place. We know that the league is coming, right? Like, they're coming up, but come, we're welcome. We welcome you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one team that is maybe a little bit ways away from being able to come at Forge right now is Valour. And so we're going to move on talking about them. Since we don't have the Valour contributor here, we have our resident Valour fan, which is obviously Mike. So I'll direct these questions to you, Mike, because I know you've had a lot to say about it between us, and I'd love to hear you talk about it now live. About all of the incomings and outgoings that Valour have had. Obviously, a lot of incomings, as you can see, for those who are seeing on the screen. Sean Hundal, Zachary Secunda, Tas Morakudis, Roberto Alarcon, Jordan Faria. But also, you know, you have a lot of outgoings as well, including some big names like Diego Gutierrez, Mateo de Brien, and a bunch of other players that even we thought still had a role to play in Valour. So, Mike, what has it been like to be a sort of pseudo Valour fan in the last month or so of this offseason?
Well, I mean, I grew up as a Southampton fan, so I love an underdog, which is why it's nice to be like to give Valour a bit of support. And yeah, I mean, the outgoings from the start. I mean, I think we all, like anyone who follows the league, even a slight amount, knew that Mateo de Brien wasn't going to be coming back. That was the probably the worst kept secret in the world, I think, at that point. Diego Gutierrez, he was going to be the hardest one to keep as well out of all those, and it's not surprising that teams going into CONCACAF is going to want to add him to their midfield. But yeah, like you say, there's a few other names on there you thought might stick around, like Walter Ponce, things like that. But they seem to have embraced what they've seen over at Halifax with Patrice Geyser ripping it apart and starting it off again. And it seems to be the way they're doing it. And they've changed their forward line quite a lot. I'm really excited to see what they can do there to try and entertain the fans a little more, because they've had these popular players just disappear on them for this season. But defensively, huge issues there. And Tom, interested to know what you think. Thomas, sorry, Tas Mordekudis. I thought he was so important for York, and I thought he'd be a really decent player to keep along, as York are losing a lot of defenders, and as much as Valour need a lot of other players added to that back line, he seems like a really good pickup for them.
100%. I mean, you look at just the amount of minutes that he's able to play. It's remarkable. When he was signed for York in 2022, right in the middle of the season, from I believe his first game was at right at the beginning of July. So from then on, he played every single minute of every single game, which was remarkable. And he's so consistently good. His abilities don't hinder even when, he's playing more and more minutes with every game. He was unfortunately injured at the start of 2023, so the Ironman streak couldn't really go on. But I think for Valour, having that person in the middle with, his size and his ability to not just in open play, but also on set pieces, he was so good for York getting the ball out of the area. And it will be very intriguing to see how York deals with that, because the only center back on the roster now is Noah Abatne. Mordekaitis would have been a great keep, but for Valour, Phil DeSanto said that was his priority, was Tas Mordekaitis. So really shows how his reputation in the league has grown.
I was also looking at, what people's reactions were with Valour, and I saw some parallels that people are making between Valour now and Halifax last season, in terms of all of the, a bunch of signings, a bunch of departures. And I was curious, Josh, if you feel the same way in how Valour are going about it. Do you feel like they're going about it in the right way, and sort of the way that Halifax eventually were vindicated in doing after everything that they were able to accomplish under Patricia Kaiser? Or are you still not convinced by some of the movement that Valour have been doing this offseason so far?
It's a bit of a tricky question, because in Halifax's case, they also reset the coaching staff as well, and based it upon, playing a more front-footed attacking philosophy. Obviously, that paid off in dividends for the Wanderers this year. But looking at Valour, previous to hearing that Debrienne and Gutierrez were headed out, I like a lot of their signings, like Sean Hundle, for example. I think, playing as the right number 9 and having that shirt, he could do really well. But I don't know necessarily how things will go if they don't tweak their system a little bit more, right? Like, Phil DeSantos is still in charge. Is he going to be able to play a more entertaining, a more direct form of attacking football this year with these players, or not? And we'll see how it plays out. But I'm kind of on the fence with how things will shake out this year for them.
I have a lot of time for Phil DeSantos. I think that kind of gutting things, hopefully we get to see the best out of Valour, but also the best out of Phil. Because I think if they don't do well this year, obviously he's not going to be brought back, right? Like Valour, we know Valor's not a place where they were going to fire him because they can't afford to, or that's not in their financial model, right? They're not going to pay someone to not work for them. Yeah. And so this is the last year of his contract. So I hope for his sake that they are able to improve on last year. And I do like this step, a number of these steps that they're taking. The signings, I think, are quality. Like you said, I think Kundal in the right situation, motivated in the right way, I think can be a let's call it a prolific goal scorer within the context of the CPL. I think he can bag you at least 10 goals a year in the right context. And so it'll be interesting to see how Phil brings all these new players together and shapes things and molds things.
Were you a little sad when Sean Hundle left for Valour from Vancouver FC, or was that something that you kind of saw, maybe not to Valour, but you saw Sean Hundle leaving to another team in the CPL coming?
Sad, it would not be an emotion I used to describe how I felt about that. Like, I guess, like, obviously Sean did so much like on the field. His goals were crucial and historic and momentous and all that kind of stuff. So taking away nothing from that, but I like off the field, he wasn't like. There's lots of players on this young squad who kind of went out of their way to like connect into the community, connect with the fans, connect with the supporters, and Hundal wasn't really one of those people. On top of that, the way I think his play is a little bit limited. That's why I think Phil has to play him get him in the right kind of setup with the right mentality and the right approach, because he's not a player who's necessarily gonna be all that great for you in like doing a lot of pressing or a lot of defensive work. And then obviously you saw when Diaz came in, took his number, took his spot, he was asked to play a different role. He I don't think he had the right attitude. I wouldn't call him unprofessional, but I just don't think he had the right attitude. And so as supporters, we all knew that, yeah, okay, there's no way he's coming back, because he's not going to want to come back. And you don't want someone who doesn't want to be a part of what you're doing. And so there was no shock. But at the same time, I don't think as supporters, it's a kind of situation where we like wish him poorly or whatever. I think you're very likely to see Valour play an early game out in Vancouver against Vancouver FC. And I think for the most part, I think the reception will be warm and cordial before the game, and hopefully even just as good or better after the match.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they get on. I think there's still a lot of work to do on that defense. There's so many players left who weren't reliable, and like Thomas said, Mordekudis was so strong physically. They was able to go on. It's going to be really interesting how they adapt. And I mean, Phil Dos Santos said to us in an interview, like he's targeting local Canadian players in the league to start with, and he's done it quick, so he's got time to start working and start getting his philosophy across to them. We'll see how they can kick off the season. We're going across on the ferry over to Pacific. There's not too many incomings so far. Obviously, I mean, today Dadaluke and George Mukambilwa returns. We got that out. But Manny Aparicio won't be. I mean, let's kick off with like Felipe. This is going to be a near on impossible job. Maybe even more so than what Bobby has trying to replace Magicar James.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I have a lot of time for Manny Aparicio, somebody who's been in the league for a while now, and you can see the way that he plays. He's so influential, even when the team doesn't seem to be playing all that well. He's still someone that can be that spark, and you can never underestimate a player like Manny Aparicio, because he has the ability and the talent to just switch it on when he wants, and when he wants us to kind of take it all on himself. Sometimes he struggles with it, but a lot of the times he actually managed to do it, and he scored some great goals for Pacific through the years. So to see him go from Pacific is going to be, I know a lot of Pacific fans are going to be sort of sad, but I guess it's, after a player dedicates so much time for a team like your own team, I'm sure at a certain point, the same thing with, Wubens Passius at Forge, like Kevin can understand. It's like at some point you're just gonna be like, I wish you well. Hopefully you go somewhere bigger and better. Question is, obviously, is he gonna go to the MLS now, or is he going to go to another CPL team? Because I think his ambitions are obviously to go to a team like maybe it's a Canadian team like the Whitecaps or Toronto FC or Montreal, maybe as a depth piece, but can he at his age now be, can he justify getting that sort of pay grade at the MLS level at his age, even though he is a talented player for MLS team to kind of take a crack at him. And I know a lot of people have been wanting him to go to some CPL teams as well. Josh, I heard a big push from a couple of Halifax fans for Manny Aparicio to go and play under Patrice Geyser, and that's something I think actually on an episode that we had a little while ago, we flirted with that idea, and I said that Manny Aparicio under Patrice Geyser could make a hell of a midfield alongside Lorenzo Caligari. Is that a dream for you, do you think, having a player like Manny Aparicio, or do you think he's destined for something higher?
I think all of the East Coast is rooting for Manny to end up playing in Patrice's system. I mean, the conspiracy theories have been flying all over the place, essentially since the season ended and it was confirmed that he was out of contract. Having said that, it is a dream. I do think and have reported on that he's looking for a move to the MLS. I'm not sure whether he'll get it or not, but I did report that there was interest from a couple of the clubs. Meanwhile, if he were to land back in the CPL and not kind of get the contract he was looking for, he's kind of got his pick of the litter. At one time, I think there was 5 clubs who had contract offers on the table, making him both the highest paid player and I think there was a lot of term included as well. So it'll be very interesting to see where he ends up at the end of this. But I would definitely feel for Pacific fans if he ends up falling back to the CPL and then playing for someone else.
I mean, Thomas, that's something you've seen as well with Manny Aparicio playing for a different club after leaving your own when he left at that time York 9 to go to a different team. What do you see as a future for Manny Aparicio right now after in life after Pacific? Would he be willing to go maybe now to a project like York United with new owners, stuff like that? Or do you think that he will probably hold out for MLS? Would that be a signing you would want to have back in this new era of York United?
I think 100%. As someone, Manny is from Toronto, so it kind of immediately works out like that. And you kind of hate to dwell on Aparicio because Pacific is a team, but just looking at the record with and without him, he made up so much of that roster in the midfield. He pulled so many strings, and I remember Pacific played York in late April, and Pacific blew York out of the water. It was not close at all. But one of the goals, Aparicio, he started in midfield and he finished with getting the goal right inside the box. He does so much for them on offense. He's also just a fighter, like in spirit. Like he will get in the referee's face, and he's such a good ambassador for a team. That's why we saw him get the captain's armband, I think a couple times with Pacific. I know Josh Hurd was the regular captain, but I believe he wore the armband a couple times, and he was once York Nine's captain too. So I believe he's ready for MLS, and I think that is the next step for him. But just considering, York would want to make a splash, and he has history here. He's from here, maybe because he is someone, that speaks Spanish as well. Obviously not the same nationality as the owners, but still maybe you try to kind of bring in that like Latin American theme a bit more with a guy like Cordova and then Aparicio. I would love to see him play here, but I think he's ready for MLS, and I think someone like John Hurban at TFC has to take a really long look at him and think rebuilding his team, getting someone from Toronto, getting someone proven in the CPL. And to be honest, Aparicio, I think, was ready for the next step last year. So even more so this year after he's played more games. He played more games this year than last year and had a much better season. So I think he's ready for MLS.
I too am ready for Manny to shush people in MLS.
Great job. But
still not over that.
Yeah. But I mean, for Pacific, it's not just Manny Aparicio leaving. Also, it's the some issues bringing some people in. It was reported that Riyad Moore was apparently joining Pacific as well as Frank Stirring, but there was apparently some issues with the financials going on with Frank Stirring. There was allegedly there wasn't enough funds to sign him. So I know personally, for looking at Pacific right now, I had mentioned before their curse, which their blessing that I think in the end turned out to be more of a curse, was they had way too much talent and they didn't know what to do with it across the season. They had arguably the best depth out of any team in the CPL, especially at the start of the season, especially when you bring in some of the players, Ayman Salouf when he came in, Isan Ongaro, knowing what he did for the Eddies, he was somebody that people were putting as potentially a Golden Boot or winner at early favorites. And it felt like for James Merriman, he didn't really know what to do with all of that talent. So I think for me, seeing what Pacific are going to do in this offseason is, can they find and strike that balance between having an incredible, depth of players, but also being able to find the right players to fit under one system. We didn't really see until sort of the end in the playoffs of Pacific kind of show a little bit of different character, different spirits, a little bit of pragmatism. I mean, James Merriman came out with a 4-4-2, which a lot of people were surprised out, and it worked wonderfully for him and his team. And I'm thinking that I think we need to see a little bit more of that from Pacific, just a little bit of more pragmatism in that you have a lot of talent, but if you can't fit all of it into one team and you can't fit all of it into one sort of system or philosophy, then you're going to have a bit of trouble having an identity. And I think that's what happened to Pacific last season. And so I'm looking forward to see, maybe with the potential transfers that they bring in, maybe if they have some other players going out, where they might fall, and if they'll have a season where they can finally kind of stand back up and be consistent and show a little bit of that grit and determination that we saw in 2021.
I think there's a little bit of comparisons.
Go ahead,
there's a little bit of comparisons with like Valour in a way with the strikers. I think the biggest issue they've got is the strikers, Ongaro, Genario Daniels, Adonijah Reed. None of them can do all the things that the number 9 needs to do in the system. And James Merriman was forced to change because, we've got on paper all these great players who can fit these roles, but when they're on the pitch together, it wasn't quite working. And I don't know if you guys who have seen them throughout the season, maybe not covering them specifically, but when they've come against your side, as the season went on, they didn't know what to do. I mean, for me, Sean Hunter would have been fantastic going into that maybe as well. They could have brought him across there. But I've got concerns personally about that. It's going to have to be a really different setup this year if they're not going to bring in the number of players, because other teams are getting a jump start on the signings. I mean, what kind of Pacific are we going to see that are going to get the goals to get them where they want to be?
Thomas, you want to say something too?
Yeah. Since Alejandro Diaz left them in 2022, they went downhill after that, and then next season comes around, so good in the first half. They were top by a mile, really, and we kind of forget that because Cavalry ended up winning by 13 points or something like that. But Pacific were top for so long, and just they couldn't find a win. And it does go to show you that James Merriman's system with these players, it does work, and when it does, it's one of the best in the league. But it just gets figured out too quickly, and I feel like it's going to take players stepping up on and off the pitch so they get out of those dry spells a lot quicker. I think a guy like Adonijah Reed was kind of big for them last year because he's so fast, so skilled. You can get the ball up to him, and he can do some great things. He was outstanding in the playoffs. I thought he was incredibly good. And in goal, I think we saw Emil Gazdov kind of step was good after Callum Irving left. We kind of thought I think we all thought that was going to be a pretty big hole for them and a pretty big problem, but it really wasn't because Gazdov stepped up. So if Merriman can find a way to keep trying new things throughout the season that work, that'll be huge, because we know Pacific at their best is the best in the league.
I think they need to just tell Scooter that every game is a playoff game, and that'll help them a lot. Thomas, I will push back a little bit on the Gazdov thing, because I feel like they made a decision to go with these young keepers, especially Gazdov. I think that helped them in their salary budget structure and whatever, going young at the keeper position. But in that stretch there where you were talking where they couldn't buy a win, often it was because Gazov was dropping a ball and allowing a guy to, put the ball into an empty net. And it cost them severely. I think I respect the decision to take a young player and to grow with them and to, deal with the ups and downs. And so for his sake and for what they're doing, I hope they continue that. You don't want to destroy his confidence. I was talking to someone connected to them and I said, why are you going this route? And it was like, well, what are you going to do? You're going to take him out and then destroy his confidence, right? And they even maybe did a little bit of that during the season until they got the balance right, or they got him a little bit better. Because you're right, in the playoffs he was at a better level on the whole. But I think earlier in the season, it was an early season or mid-season where he was dropping all those balls, where it was just like if they had gotten those 3 points on those occasions, I think they would have been in and around the top at the end of the season, which then helps you in the playoffs and all that kind of stuff. So I agree with you guys. They have a multiple areas that multiple questions that they need to answer in this offseason and that James needs to work at. And I have a lot of time for James and a lot of respect for him. So I think he can sort it out. But I guess one other thing is, this is a question for you, Felipe. How come Saluf doesn't start every game? Is it just a fitness thing? Is it just they want him as a super sub? Because he is a good player. But then he starts only 1 out of 3 or whatever it was. It was I can't remember the actual number. It seemed really low.
Yeah, no, I was surprised about that as well. From what I could have gleaned, I think it has to do a bit with form and work rate. Even though he had a really good first half of the season, I think when things started to go wrong, I think there was a bit of an issue with his work rate, and then he was creating a lot of chances, but he really wasn't helping out all that much, I think, defensively. And so I think for him, he started to feature a bit more of a bit part and an impact player. And I think it changed towards the end, because I remember in the game against, I think it was York United, where they threw him on for last 10 minutes, and he would not stop running. He wouldn't stop pressing to make life as hard as possible for York United's defense, so they wouldn't be able to just keep bombing those balls forward. So I'm thinking he's working on it. I think he's going to have a bigger role this season as he works out on, I think, work rate and fitness a bit, because there were a couple games where he just looked gassed by the 60th and 70th minute. I mean, for somebody who likes to dribble and take on players, it's obviously a tiring job. And if you don't have the fitness for it, he's still a young player and playing, it's his first time, I think, playing at a proper higher level than when he was playing in the Netherlands. So I'm hoping to see a bigger season from him, because he was genuinely, in the first half of the season, my favorite player to watch in the league. He was so entertaining to watch. I'm hoping that he gets a bigger part to play in 2024, because he's a very, very much an exciting player. But Zach, since we just talked to you, we'll move on to Vancouver FC, and we'll talk a little bit more about what you were saying there for Vancouver FC right now. Obviously, it's second year after the expansion year. A lot of lessons learned. You all also had a lot of outgoings at the end of last season. A lot of players. I mean, on the graphic right there, it says that Vasco Fry, this loan ended. Renan Garcia's contract expired and stuff, and Mickey Cantave contract expired. But today we actually got the news that they signed back on. So the outgoings kind of shrink a little bit. But were you surprised to see these many outgoings, especially with some players like Minjae Kwok, with Nima, Amir Kanani? Is it something that sort of took you by surprise, or are you more looking forward now towards the players that they're bringing in? Like you mentioned earlier, Ben Fisk. Is this the kind of signing that's moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I think in the same way that in the middle of the season, I wasn't surprised that there were so many people moved on and a number of people brought in. I'm not surprised at this at all. I think, the one of those players that you mentioned that probably hurts the most is probably Minjae Kwok to me, but I think that's more a result of the fact that he has a significant lower leg injury or whatever. He just has surgery or whatever. I don't know if you follow him on Instagram, but he had surgery, and so I think he's not going to be able to play football for a number of months, and I think that's the only reason why he hasn't been brought back, which is an unfortunate part of the football world sometimes for players. So I wish him well, and I hope he returns to fitness and able to get on somewhere. And I would love to see him back, even mid-season or whatever, if that's a possibility. I really, Garcia has been signed to 1 year plus a club option. Fry and Quintab are 2 year guaranteed plus a club option. So I think those are really great moves. Everyone else on there, I'm not. I guess maybe the one I'm half surprised about is Amir Kanani. I think that the fact that he stuck with the club and gave up his, I guess, college eligibility or whatever it was to sign the pro deal or to continue to stay, whatever. I thought that meant that he was going to be back next year. Technically, he can if there's an invitation for him to come to preseason training and I guess reprove himself. But I'm not sure that he'll take that option. Like we said, Sean is not surprising at all. Lennon Thompson is not surprising in that his dad was the assistant coach, and my understanding is his dad won't be back either. Has chosen not to come back either for the coming season. So that's not really surprising. I think the guys they have brought back, and the addition of Fisk and the other additions that are on their way, I think are encouraging and exciting and pushing things towards where they need to go. I guess one other player that's not on there too, then on the departed list is I'm pretty sure that Ibrahim Bakari won't be back either. I'm sure you all heard about that or whatever, but that's not. The ink isn't settled on that, but I'm pretty sure that that's going to happen in the days or weeks ahead as well. But overall, I think that season 2 will be in a much better place in terms of our squad building. I know, Felipe, I know you know this, but our squad last year, the squad building was hampered by the fact that Rob Friend had to focus all his time on dealing with the Township of Langley to make sure that there was actual stadium to play in, and so I'll avoid slagging anyone off, but the squad building duties were in someone else's hands, and that person's no longer a part of our club. So I think that's we've progressed there because now I think you'll see more of a. I mean, you already did in the mid-season, right? You've seen Rob Friend's hands in those mid-seasons move. You've seen him obviously in the Fisk move, and I think you'll see him in some of these other moves that will be announced in the near future. So I'm encouraged. All that to say, I'm encouraged, and I think there is a progression, and we hope that the progression will be lived out on the pitch by the players and be visible for all to see in the standings.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think a lot of the sort of people that they've kept on, obviously those those 3 main players, the midseason additions that they brought in, they have made a significant change to them throughout the team. They gave them a backbone, so be able to bring them back in is huge. Ben Fisk, I think, is a solid player to bring back a local boy, East Van boy like myself, back to Vancouver is going to be a nice touch for a lot of local fans, and he's hopefully can bring back some of the talent that he showed a few years back. First player to play for 4 or 5 teams, I think it was, in the CPL. 4 teams, kind of crazy. Journeyman here.
5 of you count Edmonton.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah, Edmonton before the CPL, technically. But Thomas, I know you had some thoughts about VFC. What were you thinking?
Well, I'm just thinking, in my opinion, given the way they ended the year, and I think just, knowing that how good of a coach Ashton Gottby is, I think Vancouver could develop into a CPL playoff team pretty quickly. And I'm not saying it's going to come this year, but I think with that extra spot, I feel like they could be a team that kind of slips in right at the end. But my one big question is how good is the youth going to be? Because that was a big part of their season last year, which was getting over 6,000 U21 minutes. And I just think Vancouver's kind of quickly turning into a bit of a developmental machine. Lennon Thompson's going to hard speed. Then you've got TJ Tahid and James Cameron both trialing abroad. And I think for Vancouver, because those are 2 very valuable players, even if they are, younger than a lot of top CPL guys, you really don't want them to go, especially in the middle of the season. Vancouver did a lot of great stuff in the middle of the season last year, or taking guys off the roster that didn't necessarily want to be there, like someone like Gal Sandoval, which was kind of a pretty marquee signing when he joined, but slowly went downhill. So they don't want to lose they're the guys that they want to stay in mid-season, but just given the looks that they're getting as a club, I would think that could come to play at some point. I also just want to say that their X factor this year, in my opinion, is going to be Caden Chung. Having a full year of him will be incredible for them to lead the defense. I think you really saw him being missed for a lot of last season.
Yeah, I agree with you for sure, Thomas. I think just the TJ and James being abroad, technically I don't think they're trials. They're more like training stints. Although there is amongst the supporters, there is concern that the potential for James leaving sooner rather than later is concerning. Because apparently there's some interest or whatever, and maybe you've seen rumors online or whatever. But TJ, I think, will be here for a little bit longer, like at least another year. I think part of it's to do with age and all that kind of stuff before he hopefully gets a move abroad. And I think Caden, I didn't love Caden playing central midfield last year, even though he was totally able to. And that was to replace. We had a signing that was the visa just didn't come through, and we couldn't get the visa to work. And so that's why Caden was filling kind of that role. But yeah, I agree with you. It hurt us not to have him at right back, and I hope this year he is like the mainstay at right back and can connect with, especially when Fisk, if Fisk is ever playing on the right, can connect well with him, and really be a difference maker for us from that spot.
I think. Sorry, can I jump in there real quick? Yeah, sorry, Mike. I think Vancouver too needs a lot of credit for kind of weathering the storm for that first half of the season and really growing into themselves for the second half, because I mean, it's not really a secret that they were basically pushed into the league a little bit ahead of schedule with Edmonton having the problems that they had, right? Like, I don't know if Vancouver was really ready or able to get built as much as they wanted to be on such a short pattern. But I mean, from the second half of that season on, like, they really looked like they were coming together. So I'm really looking forward to what they bring next year, because I think they kind of things were stacked against them to start. So I hope that they really can pull it off next year and do something a little bit better.
Sadly, I think our stadium will not be as improved as our squad will be for this coming year.
Yeah, it's a shame. You know what? Tell me a little bit about, if you don't mind, if we have time to talk a little bit about that stadium and how it looks like. I got to come out for a game, and I still don't know.
You were there when we beat you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for the reminder. Your first ever win, right? Yeah, it was. But I mean, it has potential. But I mean, I still don't know how I feel about that stadium. How do you guys feel about it? Like, coming there, it looks like it should be for the future. Like, it's residential all around. There's so many other like volleyball pitches, and like everything is going on there. It looks like a real central hub for the community. Is it something that's going to be? Is it a good location? And the stadium itself, how can they make that more soccery, for lack of a better word?
Kevin, we only have an hour left, so I don't think we can talk about the location.
Okay, fair enough.
But no, I mean, for it is what it is, right? And there's within the local community, there's very strong opinions about where the stadium is and the name and all these things. And for me, those things aren't deal breakers for me. Is what we have ideal? Personally, no. But is that going to stop me from supporting and being a part of things and trying to help things grow and be meaningful? No. So, so the actual stadium. No, basically, the story is this. The Township of Langley, I think, budgeted certain amounts to build this stadium, and in their conversations with our owners, with 6-5 Sports, they, I think, promised certain things or kind of said, "Hey, this is where we're going to go." So 6-5 Sports, the rendering included things like, a roof, and a number of other things. But I think partly what happened was, as things tend to happen in the public sector, they cost a lot more, right? When you actually go and actually do them. Plus, I think a significant cost for building the stadium is, I think this is already done. I think they the stuff that they had to put in the ground there so that one day they can build a roof, that cost, I think, way more money than they were anticipating. And so that's where I think all the money essentially went for the stadium, right? So Are we happy with it? No. Is it our home? Yes. Do we make the best of it? Yes. Are there things there that we do like for where I hang out in the supporter section, safe standing? It's great. Do we love that we're an extra 10, 20 feet or whatever away from the end line? No. But the one pro is we do in our end have a small rigging system that we can use, which we used a couple of times this year. That was a lot of fun, and we'll hopefully use that again in the future. So there are pros and cons to it, right? I mean, one of the biggest cons right now is, and we all experienced this last season, was I remember the first time we had a night game, we were all like, "There's not enough lights here. Like, this is way too dark." And you saw that because if we had enough lighting, I'm pretty sure you'd see the Cavalry game for the Champions Cup be held in the Lower Mainland and not on the island for multiple reasons. And you might even see the Whitecaps Champions Cup game being held there as well. Although for the Whitecaps, it's probably better to go to the island to, connect with fans there or whatever. But so there are a number of shortcomings. The bad thing is in the Township of Langley's public information that they put out about what they're spending money on is they have money for, I think it's some kind of ice hockey stuff. There is some football stuff, but it's like an indoor facility for like fields that will be inside for better winter stuff. And the only thing that connects to the stadium is I think this isn't even necessarily money they have, but they say they want to put an LED screen at the stadium that'll cost $950,000 is what they've kind of put it at. But that doesn't mean that they have money set aside for it. That's just what they think it'll cost when they do it. So unfortunately, we're all going into this year expecting more of the same, unfortunately. Although I think they're probably going to work a little bit at kickoff times to make them not less at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever. So maybe the sun gets avoided a little bit more. And I think we're going to have a little bit of storage at the stadium, so that should help us in terms of what we do.
Yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be exciting to see how they keep progressing after some like you say, good transfer windows and seem to be more on track of what they want to become. So, I look forward to seeing year 2 with Vancouver. But over in Ottawa, we've maybe touched on already. Dave Brienne, he returns, the excitement surrounding the city. But I mean, Josh, I was going to ask you, looking at this team, like a lot of loan signings and haven't been confirmed to return, especially in the defence. It's not really all. They had their issues, which cost them getting into the playoffs, of holding on and not being able to do what they were so stereotypically had early on that season. There's got to be quite a lot of work that's got to go into this team to justify really like continuing with the head coach.
100%, Mike. I mean, the club really doubled down on Carlos Gonzalez, giving him leeway for this upcoming season. Of course, there's some big pieces back in, Nathan Ingham. Of course, El Toro, Alberto Zapater is going to be back as well. They were able to bring in Debrienne. So a lot of the key pieces have kind of been figured out. But as you mentioned, there's still a lot of holes. And I think we'll be seeing quite a bit of news about them in the coming weeks as they announce a few more signings to sort of round out the roster. But, I'm expecting them to do better this year, just given, the leadership that they do have on the squad and the experience. It wasn't that long ago that they won the regular season, right? So I'm expecting a return to form for them coming over the next few months.
Yeah, is anyone else like looking at that sort of defense? Like, I think I'm trying to look through that, and obviously, like we met is still there, but like Luke Singh's gone, a decent player. Can they replace these players, as well as how much is going to need to change to get Ollie Bassett a bit more help and Sam Sorter up there, gets them some bodies to help them in sort of these transitional attacks?
I think for me, I think you need another. Or not another, but just someone that's a bit more mobile than Alberto Zapater in defensive midfield. I think you look at Zapater and he is definitely valuable to Ottawa because he's tough to get by. He's a legend in Zaragoza, and when Diego Maradona gives you a nickname, you have kind of a bit of a special talent. So, Maradona calling him El Toro, that's just shows you how famous he is in some parts of the world. But I just think, we saw his flaws, and he is 38 now, and his heat maps were just basically in the center circle. And just the way Ottawa played, where Bassett was often alongside Zapater, in the formation, it's not going to work like that. Bassett has to be right at the top, right behind Salters. It's a bit of a second striker. And I think, Ottawa, although this does kind of go against their, identity in terms of their Spanish brothers at Atletico Madrid, they're going to have to embrace the offensive game a bit more, because I think with Gazik Sam Salter as well, we saw he can be inconsistent, but he can also be a very great striker, as we saw in Halifax. So, I think they have to lead into that a bit more, as you guys said about the defense. That's kind of not fully sorted out yet, but Nate Ingham coming back was huge. I think he's great captain material as well, which is worth mentioning. And Debrian's going to do a lot for them at fullback. He's someone going both downs of the pit, going down both ends of the pitch. Is going to be really huge for Ottawa's hopes of bouncing back from what was a really disappointing season.
We're going to try to not pad their stats this year as well.
I would just add to that as well, Thomas. It was almost a tale of two seasons for Atletico in a lot of ways, because the first half they were right in there in the race, and then they had that total collapse near the end going in towards the playoffs. Part of that was the inability to provide service to their attacking players. As you said, Sam Salter, for all his flaws, he is a goal scorer. He tucked quite a few for Halifax the year previous. If you look at his end of season stats, he actually still did pretty well, all things considered. But it starts with their defending as well. And although they do have a more defensive mindset and are more likely to park the bus, they were collapsing in the final minutes of matches, right? A key example that jumps to mind for me was I think it was in September. We're in the middle of the playoff race, and they let Zachary Fernandez go down the left side of the pitch and put a ball in, and all of a sudden it's 3-2 Halifax, and that happened again and again and again. So as important it is for them to embrace that attacking side, and Debrian, I think, as a fullback, is going to help add a bit of creativity to their side. They have to prioritize looking after the ball as well.
Yeah, I'll jump in a little bit on that too, Josh. I think what you said is exactly right, and I think that Ottawa, the Madrid connection, I think it's in their DNA, as you guys were saying, and I think they are going to try and embrace that defensive style, and it's what works for them. And I think as much as everybody wants to see that swashbuckling style every game between two teams, styles make fights. And it's kind of nice sometimes that there is a team that you can kind of hate on for being boring or whatever, but they're true to their roots. And I think that's what they actually need to do, because their biggest flaw coming down the season wasn't not creating the offense. It was letting those late goals in because their defense didn't hold up. And to add to that, I think one of the advantages of being the only team that's owned by a European powerhouse is that you have all these connections. They're going to find some guys, as they always do, with some name power from other places, whether it be like a B squad, a Madrid B or C squad, whatever, that can handle playing here, and they're going to find some guys. So I think that they really don't need to focus on the offense as much, because they still have a Golden Boot winner. Right? They'll still put in, they don't need to put in a lot of goals. They just need to put in the right goals and then protect it. And I think as much as sometimes it gets hated on, I think embracing their DNA and just saying, look, we're going to put one in and then you guys try and score on us. Good luck. I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. What you guys are saying are fantastic points. I know for us, when we were talking about it on the podcast, we couldn't believe week in and week out everything that was going on with them. Just so much tragedy. I mean, that's for those that have read the zine. That's what I titled the Ottawa article, "Tragedy in Added Time," as well. The name of of the section is because of what happens so much, and I think for them, it's going to be a mentality issue at the end of the day, more than anything, is to just be able to, know that it's not just in the 90 minutes, it's the 90 plus. And how can we make sure that we hold on for that amount of time? Because, once or twice is a coincidence, but have it time and time and time and time again. At that point, it's like this is pointing out to bigger things. So for Carlos Gonzalez, obviously the trust, they put trust in him again for the next season, and bringing in Mateo de Brienne clearly shows that he's willing to go with a more of an attacking intent in some areas of the pitch, because you don't bring a player like Mateo de Brienne in for him to stay behind his midfielder for 90 minutes. You expect him to bomb forward and overlap, and that's what he's fantastic in. So I'm excited to see how Ottawa are going to be able to sort of balance between that defensive identity that they have thanks to their partners in Spain, and also give a little bit more in the attacking sense to give a bit more balance both on the pitch and maybe mentality in the mind as well. But we'll move on now to our last team, the final team, which were the league champs, Cavalry FC. These are a team that, yeah, Kevin, I was actually going to go to you about this because they obviously added a big name in Diego Gutierrez to their midfield, who is, for me, I named him my underrated player of the season last year because of what he was for Valour, just the captain, that rock in the midfield, the way that he might now play in that double pivot, beside who we don't know out of the maybe Charlie Trafford or some of these players that we saw before. But is this a signing of intent now, do you think, for Cavalry to say this is not going to be a one season thing? Like we're going to want to come back and pretty much defend it now, maybe go far in CCC, maybe, get a rematch grudge match in the CPL final in 2024, hopefully with as beautiful as goals as we got in the 2023 final. Are you a little worried about the way that Cavalry are sort of moving in the direction that they have been moving in the off season? Is it kind of giving some alarm bells for Forge fans?
Yeah. I mean, simply put, like, that shot's fired. Like they were already probably the best offensive team in the league, the most well-rounded team for the course of the season. So I mean, yeah, definitely the way that they're coming at this so aggressively, it's really impressive. And one of the things I noticed too, we were talking earlier about how Pacific struggled to get, like, they had so much talent and they struggled to find guys that do it all and together. I think that's one of the great strengths of the two top teams in the league historically, which is Cavalry and Forge, is that they get guys to buy into things, like Taryn Campbell deciding that he'll play on the wing and just, run around the pitch, pressing everybody, buying into that, knowing he was like a golden boot winner and stuff like that. Or Ruben Spacias, understanding that he's going to have to play on a wing, or Borges having to take a smaller role, knowing that he's been a golden boot winner. Having all that kind of talent and getting them to buy into roles that maybe they don't necessarily dream of for themselves is a big part. And I think Cavalry does that really well too. Like, to look at the guys, like Joe Mason was a few years ago, this signing that was like a signing of intent because he was such a big guy coming from the UK and stuff like that. And he's kind of an afterthought with Bevan and Musi and stuff like that now, right? So the fact that these guys, they just keep building, they're never like standing pat, it's a big deal. So I really like the signings. From a neutral point of view, as a Forge fan, I hate them, but I think it's really great because I think these teams, and Pacific is in here too, I think these teams push each other, right? So all of them bringing in big guys and not being afraid to kind of like overload on the talent positions and still find spots for people to like be able to play and not worry about is there going to be enough of the ball for them. We'll figure it out. I think that's an important thing. And I think when you have great coaching minds like Tommy, finding a way to get guys into the games and make them successful, I think he's going to do a really good job with this. And I mean, I just think these are great signings. And I want to talk. Oh, I'm still kind of curious too, because having lost Escalante in the weirdest kind of way possible, hopefully we get to talk about that in a little bit too. But But I think bringing in these guys who are like positive, want to be there kind of guys. And I mean, who doesn't want to sign for a team that's likely to be in the finals again, right? Or who has a legitimate shot at winning the league, right? I mean, you're going to find it a lot easier to recruit right now when you're a team like Cavalry or Forge. And I think Cavalry's really buying into their strength, which is like, we're going to be assertive and we're going to be the best and watch how we sign players. I think it's a great signing. And it makes me crazy that I don't know who we're signing.
I would just add to what you said there, Kevin. You know, they have built so much this season, and nowhere is that more apparent than in their reputation, right? To me, having Champions Cup football, you know, Tommy and gang hosting a trophy this year. They were also able to sell on Gauthier and Tigny as well to League Two in France. All of this bodes really well for the club and draws players in because they know, hey, I'm going to be competing, you know, in a big international competition. I'm going to have a shot at winning the domestic league. And if things go really well and somebody likes me, like this is a club that's willing to move me on to another league, a bigger league. And that's plus a feather in Cavalry's cap. And yeah, I really like what they were able to pull off this season.
Yeah, they're making some moves. I mean, it's not just. I mean, Diego Gutierrez is the big one. They also brought in Leighton Brooks as well. And there's the rumors that for an outgoing that, like you mentioned there, Kevin Escalante, he might be going to Valour. Maybe he might be going to Pacific. So there's gonna be a little bit of movement. I don't expect them honestly to make too much movement. I see themselves going a little bit, taking a page out of Forge's book, where like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just kind of add a few kind of key pieces in, let a few players that might not be super happy with the project out, but still kind of keep that same core. Because you know, evidently through Forge, we've seen that that is the keys to success, to be able to just continue to win, have these players, and it's just finding that that hunger, that desire out of every player for the next year to be able to bring them to the next level. I mean, that's going to be probably the biggest task for Tommy now. Obviously, with the playoff loss, that's something, another goal for them to be able to go and reach to be able to maybe get that grudge match. But after that, with the CCC, yeah, there's a lot on the table for them. So yeah, I'm sure they want to just, you know, not make too much noise in the off season, just focus on the games ahead and just add a couple of staple pieces inside. Zach, do you want to close us out with a thought?
Well, I was going to say I have a lot of time for Tommy Wilden Jr. And just his approach to football, and yeah, a lot of time for him. There's a lot of things about their club that are interesting to me. As much as I enjoyed and benefited from having Mickey Katav come to Vancouver and play a significant role in the end of the season, it was a little bit sad to lose Mail Henry. And it was one of those trades where it was very beneficial to both sides, not just because Henry contributed on the pitch, but also they needed his youth minutes, I think, to help get their youth minutes up or whatever. So I'm excited to see what happens with him in 2024, and will he, you know, press on, because I was really excited to have him here in Vancouver, and I look forward to seeing him progress as a player. I also think the Gutierrez signing was, when I heard that, I was like, oh, this is not good for the rest of the league, that they're bolstering things in that way. But I have a question for the rest of you. And Felipe, you know, I think you know the question I'm going to ask, but maybe I haven't heard other people's perspective on this. Is it just me, or does Meyer, Bevan, embellish and go to ground too quickly, too early, too often?
It does get him his penalty goals. So,
he was perfect from the penalty spot, so you know, he'll take it. He'll take what he can get.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, if that's the way that he wants to score and he can win them, then you know. So
I really don't like Meyer Bevan as a footballer, not as a human being, but as a footballer, I don't really.
Until this VAR, he is fine.
Yeah, him and Josh Hurt as well.
Anything I say is going to come off as biased, but yeah.
I was going to say, Zach, I don't think he's doing anything different that everyone else's clubs are doing. I don't know. There was a couple times this season where Massimo Ferrin made a referee look foolish upon replay. So it happens everywhere. But I know what you're saying. I see it sometimes too.
I just feel bad because he ruined our first ever home match. Because to me that it wasn't even a foul on Rocco Romeo. My personal
Oh, right. Yeah.
Oh, that yes.
The infamous
Right.
red card. Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
I think he won a penalty in the second game or something that was, again, to me, not a penalty. And I told him after, I had words with him. I talked to him about his embellishment. He said, yeah, he's just going to keep doing it because he gets calls. So whatever.
The game is the game. The game is the game.
I told VAR. We all want VAR, right? Or VAR light. Or I know the owners have been talking about VAR in the box. Kevin says no. You don't want VAR, Kevin?
Sorry, I'm one of those guys. I talked to a guy out in Halifax, right from a ways, and we're of the same mind in that Gary and I both think the same thing. When our league is so little and it's running well, and you look at week in, week out, like Liverpool's calls and this kind of thing, and it doesn't really solve anything. It just takes your moment at the stadium, which is the only thing we have is at the pitch right now, is you cheer and then you hold your cheer because you're waiting to look up at the scoreboard to see if VAR is going to look at it. I'm like, maybe one day down the road, but for right now, let's just all enjoy our day at the park and let it be that. For now, I just don't think we're big enough that we need it. And I mean, besides, we get to sit here and have these conversations about how much we hate that call that went against our team. That's almost the best part of footy.
I agree with you a little bit. It kind of like it is, yeah. It gives us lots to talk about. I would say you're watching, if you want to see VAR used properly, you're watching the wrong league, but that's enough.
Yeah, true.
No, the bigger problem for me is, like, I forget what the number was. I think it was 11 or 12. We lost 11 or 12 points because of VAR this year, like in and of itself. So that's one perspective. Another perspective is we're all trying to bring more people into our stadiums, into the sport, and when referees make calls that are so obviously wrong, it really hurts things. Like, it really hinders the growth of the sport and of our clubs and all that kind of stuff, and the league itself. So those are more, I guess, my concerns. I guess I agree with you that there's this. I know Michael McCall, who I podcast with, he wished there was no VAR. He wants the human element and the error and whatever. I think there are places where it's done really, really well, and you have once or twice a year where everyone's like, "Oh, they got it wrong," and then it's like, then once or twice a year we talk about that. But the other times you're like, "Oh, I'm glad we had it because no one saw him. No one saw him pat it down with his hand or whatever, or no one saw that contact or this, that, or whatever, which would have changed the result of the game." Which is, I think, the ultimate priority is that we get things right. But anyways, Meyer Bevan makes me think of VAR lots.
I think for that, like for me, like obviously watching it like from England as well, like with the VAR, it's been brought in to help the referees who are getting the majority of decisions right, to help them with difficult ones. I think the referees in the CPL need to be helped to improve so they're confident enough to do it, because at this point they're going to just go to VAR 6, 7, 8 times a half just to make sure. But like, so you need to empower them a bit better so that when it does come in, it's only used when it's necessary.
Yeah, that's very true. Josh, I know you had one last comment for us, moving away from VAR, going back to the gaffer at Cavalry.
Sorry, I had already kind of addressed that point, but on the VAR thing, so yeah, Gary from a ways, he's hella famous over here. Yeah, I completely agree with his point of view as well. Money you spend on VAR could be spent on other things within the league, and so there's at this time it's not perfect, but there are other things I think that could be prioritized. And I actually had a chance to interview Isaac Raymond, and he's in charge of Canada Soccer's refereeing department, and he talked about trying to empower the referees that are currently here and give them the training, and then maybe in the future we can look at giving them more tools. So
sorry, I did have a comment about the gaffer still, talking about Tommy, just going back. One thing I will say, like, as much as we like to give him the business here in Hamilton, obviously, and as well we should, the one thing, the biggest moment for me and his whole season is watching when they came for the championship game. The supporters groups were there in full throat welcoming the buses. And when they got off the bus and we just gave it to him, the crowds, in his face, and the look on his face was pure joy. He's like, we've arrived. Like, this is a proper football match now, right? And I'm like, you can't begrudge him, man. That he is a good thing for this league for sure. So that's the one bit of credit I'll give to Cavalry.
Fair enough. Unless anyone has anything else to say, I think that's the episode. Thank you all so much for listening. All of the listeners who are seeing, or all of the people who are watching us on YouTube or visually. Thank you so much again to the contributors here, Kevin, Zach, Josh, Thomas, for taking time out of your day to come and chat with us, celebrate our 50th episode, celebrate the zine. We didn't talk too much about it, mostly because we want everyone to go and read it. We don't want to have any spoilers for it. But hopefully you guys can all go see the hard work that all of us have been putting in. Before we fully sign out, I want to make sure to give everyone their ability to sort of advertise themselves, let the people know where to follow you, what work you're doing. We'll start the same way that we started the episode. Kevin, you can go ahead and go first. Let the people know where they can follow you on the socials and, plug your podcast and stuff like that.
You got it. You can find me everywhere under Hammer Sparks, whether it's on Instagram, Twitter, or otherwise. And new podcasts coming out for the new year as we get a chance to interview some of the players on the team. Hopefully going to have Borges up there next, but we've got a couple of exciting players to talk to. So tune in and learn a little bit more about players and what it's like to live the life of a soccer player in Canada.
Awesome. Sounds good. Super excited for when that comes out. Josh, same thing for you.
Of course. So you can find me on Twitter at Wanderers Notes. And of course, you can find my blog at wanderersnotebook.ca. In addition to that, I've also recently started a CPL, like Canadian men's and women's national team podcast. And that's the Healey and Bailey Notebook. And that's on Spotify.
Amazing. I'll have to check that one out. I've been seeing you guys getting some episodes out, and I haven't managed to listen to one. I definitely got to do that soon. Thomas, Mr. Wunderkind himself, go ahead.
You can find me on Twitter at ThomasHewitt22, and you can find my work at CanadianSoccerDaily.com.
Yeah, that's a huge glow up for you with that Canada Soccer Daily. Very excited for you as that goes on in 2024. And last but not least, Zach, go ahead. You're muted, Zach.
Sorry. You can find me on the platform formerly known as Twitter. It's at Zachary AM. I'm a part of the AFTN podcast with Michael McCall. You can find that everywhere. Just type in AFTN or Away from the Numbers. And then I'm part of the Fraser Valley Fanatics supporting Vancouver FC. You can find us by searching FV Fanatics or Fraser Valley Fanatics on most social media.
Amazing. And then obviously we have to plug ourselves. Make sure to once again follow us on all our socials at Coast to Coast FC and let us know what you thought of our 50th episode, what you thought about the visual medium, about having multiple guests at once, the new look, the zine. There's so much to talk about. So please let us know all of your thoughts and any comments that you have. And if we see anything cool, we might shout you out in the next episode. But until next time, I'm Felipe Ojejo.
And I'm Mike Rice.
I'm Kevin Anderson.
I'm Josh Healey.
I'm Thomas Hewitt.
And I'm Zachary Meisenheimer.
And this has been Coast to Coast FC signing out.